For those of you who don't know me, my name is Marcel, and I'll be hosting this webinar, and my colleague Ruben will be presenting it. A bit of advice from my end: please stay muted during the entire presentation. You're automatically muted already when entering this webinar, so that shouldn't be an issue. If you have any questions or comments during the webinar, feel free to leave them in the chat window. We will not be answering them during the webinar, but we will send a follow-up email in which we will send you the link to the recording, which we will post online. And in this same email, we will also make room for a Q&A area where we'll be answering the questions that you have left in the chat during this webinar. Having said that, we have 4 webinars scheduled this week. The first one is obviously today, order management. We have finance and accounting tomorrow, projects and general admin, which is a combined one, on Thursday, and on Friday we end this series with the WMS. All webinars start at 11 in the morning our time, Central European time. So feel free to register for any other ones if you haven't done so yet. Having said that, I'll give the word to my colleague Ruben, who will present this webinar to you. It's all yours, Ruben.
Okay, thank you, Marcel. Well, welcome all. As said, my name is Ruben. I'm here live from The Hague, talking to you through the release notes 2022, based on order management. Well, what we talk about today, it's 4 subjects, as you've read: invoice groups, also known as consolidated invoicing, which was a highly requested suite ID. We'll talk about required deposit workflow, the bill of lading SuiteApp, and the lot and serialized numbers SuiteApp. Well, that being said, let's go to the invoice groups. This is a new feature this year. As I said, it's highly requested suite ID. The main point is that you can combine invoices on which you can apply payments. Well, there was a lot of customers were wanted this. There were a lot of customizations around this, but then as we decided finally to do this also native. It's a free feature, so you can install it just via the enable feature settings. And what will happen is that you can select on a customer, I want to group the invoices for this customer or not. And you can on sales orders select, well, I want this and this and this sales orders to be grouped into one invoice and then have them sent as one to the customer. This will create a new record in NetSuite called an invoice group. This is just like a summary record. It doesn't post to a GL account. It's just a combination of the invoices. And well, you can apply the payments to the group. I will in a minute show you everything in NetSuite. What you have to do before you can do this, of course, is go to enable features. On the transaction step, you have the billing part where you have to check the invoice groups feature. That's all quite straightforward. When you did this, you have to go to the auto-generated numbers menu where you can set up the invoice group prefix, minimum digits, etc. So everything is administrative-wise is correct. Well, as I said, what will change in NetSuite? On the customer record, there will be a checkbox called Group Invoice. This will be like a default setting for your customer. If you checked it, all invoices will be grouped based on billing address. You can, of course, leave it unchecked, and then on the sales order, check the for invoice grouping checkbox, which is also new. And so then you can select the invoice you want to group and the invoice you won't want to group. I'll show you this in a minute. When you've grouped the invoices, there are group indicators indicating which invoice will be grouped based on the billing address. And yeah, you can send them as a whole to the customer. That all sounds hopefully great, but I will show you how it works. This is just a normal, where's my mouse? Yeah, a normal NetSuite account. Here I have a normal customer, the fast food company. Nothing special, but when you see below the financial tab, there is a group invoice checkbox. This is the default checkbox, which will always have the sales orders checked as, okay, I want these sales orders to be grouped. Well, what will happen when I create a sales order? you see the normal sales order form. There is a checkbox here called for invoice grouping. Well, it's already checked, and you can uncheck it or you can check it. And this means, okay, this sales order is has to be grouped with other sales orders which have the same billing address. On the sales order, you can still change this. You can leave it unchecked, so it's being sent as a separate sales order. But you can also leave it checked as default by the customer. If you have this checked and you create the invoice, as we're going to do, you can't uncheck it on the invoice. So then it's in line. Let's select we're gonna sell a coffee table. All right. From Amsterdam. As you can see, a lot has been fixed in the release, but loading times, not so much. What will happen, the sales order will save, we'll process this, and then we create the item fulfillment and we create the invoice. We can skip the item fulfillment, go to the invoice. Once we've created this, it will show up on the group invoice page, which is here. So I'll already show you. This is the normal way how you get there. Okay, this is the invoice. As you see, there's also a checkbox here for invoice grouping. You can't uncheck it because on the sales order it has been checked. Save. And the invoice is now saved. As you can see, a new status has been added. It is now open but ungrouped. So we still have to group it to a group of invoices, which we do here. I already have an overview of invoices. As you can see, the sales order we just created has been added here. It's this one. And I also created, before this meeting, some other invoices and some other sales orders. In the last column, you can see the group indicator. This indicates which invoices can be grouped together. You see the first 4 can be grouped together and the last 2 have to be separate. That's because those have different billing addresses. So this, if you group all of these, it will create 2 invoice groups. Well, let's combine some. You just select them. You can also, if you have a lot of invoice and sales orders here, you can of course filter on customer. You can also, when you use the PO check number, you can also group it by PO check number. That's also possible. I didn't do this right now, but it's no problem. You can filter on a date. Yeah, it's not very difficult. It will jump to the process page where it will process these 2 invoices and create the invoice group, which shouldn't take too long. But in the meantime, I can tell you already the invoice group is being created. This is at the moment not able to workflow this. You can't make it automatically. With script, of course, you can do everything, and maybe some of you are very skilled in NetSuite, so you can make it automatic, but out of the box, you can't workflow the invoice groups to be created automatically. However, on the invoice group, you can have some workflows running, so that's possible. Well, I'll show you the invoice group, which has been created. This is what it looks like. It is invoice group number 2. For the first 4 company, it's open, and below you can see the 2 invoices grouped together. Well, this is in the summary view, but you can also go to the AR view, where you can have a more detailed description of what is actually in this invoice group. So the item and the VAT with all the amounts. Well, this is quite straightforward, of course. You can also click remove from group, where you can have one or two invoices removed, which you're not going to do. You can also add to group. It's a maximum of 100 invoices. You see the other two, which I previously didn't select. I can now select them. So I add one to the group. And like this, I can build up my my invoice group. So what will happen? The customer will pay, and via the normal way, we'll go to accept customer payments. And when I select first for company, I can now create the payment against the invoice group. If it loads, yeah. Well, in my invoice group, I have, for example, invoice 866. So I'll choose that one. Save. So I'm now creating a partial payment of the invoice group, which will also be the status of the invoice. So you can create a payment against one invoice, even if it's grouped. I think the status is now changed. Open partially paid, so the invoice group is partially paid. And then if I open, for example, these two invoices, I can see one has been paid in full, and the other one is still open and grouped. If for some reason I don't want this invoice anymore to be on the invoice group, I can always also use this button, remove from group, to have the invoice again separately. So it's quite dynamic. It's not that difficult, and might be a solution to some of your problems you face right now. So that concludes the invoice grouping part. Hope it was all clear, but please leave your questions in the chat and I'll get back to you with the answers. Moving on. If this works, yeah. The required deposit workflow. It's called a workflow, but it's not really like you know it's a workflow. This is also a new feature, which is free. Under the transaction subtab, you can check the required deposit workflow checkbox, which will change a little bit your sales order form. The purpose of this workflow actually is to have you, via a native NetSuite way, administrate your deposits requested on the sales order. Normally you would have to create custom fields or have it somewhere in a memo field that this deposit has been made, or we have to ask for this deposit. But now you can natively, inline, you can select the item and say, okay, for this item, it costs 800 euros. I want to have a required deposit amount of 200. This is maybe a more clear page. You can say on the line, I want to have a deposit. You can also say, I want to have over the whole order, I want to have 20% deposit. Or over the whole order, I want to have an amount of 200 euros as a deposit. How does it look like? I have a simple order here, which is pending fulfillment. And immediately you see on top, this sales order requires an initial deposit of 250 euros, but it hasn't been received yet. I already created this up front. In the total box, you can see, okay, the subtotal, the tax, the total, and also the required deposit due. So you can immediately see what the status is of the sales order. I selected an item with a unit price 850, and I have to scroll to see where it went. Well, as you can see, I requested a required deposit amount of 250 euros. So the required deposit percentage immediately 24.31%. So that's quite straightforward. And this is a nice way to administrate your deposits, which has to be made. In line, you can also see unit price 850, amount 850, and required deposit amount is 250. So both online and over the whole sales order, you can administrate this. That's actually all. It's not that difficult, but yeah, it's a nice way of administrating these deposits. There's also no workflow involved or anything. It doesn't do anything else. It's just administrating the amounts. Moving on. If it works. Yes. The enhancements to the SuiteApp bill of lading. It's a free app. I don't know if one of you uses it. It's quite common, the bill of lading. But this SuiteApp, the enhancements, it brought some simplified interfaces to the print BOL menu. It added some custom templates. You have to set some printing preferences, but that's all quite administrative. But the main change you will see are on the item fulfillment and on the sales order. There are some custom fields shown there, which you can fill in, of course, like standalone BOL notes, the PRO number, total weight. These are all custom fields added to the item fulfillment, which will come back on the bill of lading template. There's a native NetSuite bill of lading template, but you can always alter it. There are additional custom fields on the sales order, BOL freight terms, the third-party account, accessories, delivery instructions. You can all fill them out. And as a result, you can see, for example, this will be your new bill of lading. So there is a PRO number, there is a freight charge term, there are some notes, please be careful, some delivery instructions, please open carefully. Some accessory, you can choose accessorials, nice word. You can have some address in here, you can choose the weight, so you can, yeah, it's quite customizable. I will show you a little bit how it works. I have this normal sales order here, which is for grouping invoice. And on the shipping tab, you see there are some new fields. I already filled them out, like in the demo. These are just very standard fields. Yeah, nothing special. And on the item fulfillment, you see on the header level the standalone BOL nodes, PRO numbers. Yeah, those are just the standard fields. This one you can't edit. It comes from the item. And when you click print BOL, it will give you this result, as you've seen. This you can change. You can set some preferences, but yeah, this is a standard which NetSuite offers you. I hope this is all clear. It's not that difficult. It's a nice way to start the webinar week with the more simple subjects, because later on there will be some more difficult stuff. The last subject is the lot and serialized number. SuiteApp is also free. That might be handy for mostly the food and beverages industries, because when you have to, for example, you sell something and it's rotten or it's not good, you want to know where it comes from. Now you can, of course, create some nice saved searches. Marcel already said, yeah, I can also make this myself. Of course you can, but this is a nice way of having a native NetSuite solution show you where the items come from and where they went. That's what the lot and serialized number SuiteApp does. It traces items, compartments, and finished goods through the supply chain. You have forwards and backwards tracing. So you can have normal items traced, but also items which have been combined. And it will show you the inbound orders, so the purchase order and the item receipt, the outgoing orders, the sales order and the item fulfillment, any build which has been done in between, and any other transactions like an inventory adjustment. What will happen? I will show you this in the last demo. Yeah, in NetSuite, you have a lot numbered inventory item, for example, or a serial inventory item, depends. I'm working now with lot numbered. This is fast for a computer, which is a very simple item, nothing special. And yeah, I bought 100 of these computers. So there's incoming, there's an inbound purchase order, and item receipt of this purchase order of 100 items. So I know where they come from. Then I'm going to create a sales order. I want to sell my computers, so I'll sell them to for example, HEMA. I want to sell my fast four computer to them, and I want to let me just quickly reset. I'm going to sell the computer to HEMA Amsterdam as an item, fast for computer. And have Amsterdam as the inventory location. For €1,000. And I'm going to save this sales order. Well, you save the sales order, and you fulfill the sales order, and it arrives at HEMA, but in the end, they find out the computers are not working, or they're broken, or, well, when you work in food and beverages, maybe the food is not, it's not good, whatever can happen. You find out that it's not good. Let me quickly finish this. So what will happen? You sold these computers, and you know they're not good. What are you going to do? There's a new functionality now in NetSuite called the lot trace. This is what it looks like, and here you can enter the item which is not correct and the lot number. You find this below reports and go to the bottom, lot serial trace, and then you have the lot trace or the serial number trace. You can also set some preferences. You can only set one preference, of course. It looks like this. The preferences are not that interesting. These are all quite straightforward. The only thing I've adjusted is the subtabs, which you see. I want to see all of them, but you can also, for example, if you never build anything, you can also leave that out. Well, on the lot trace, I'll set up my fast for computer. I have to enter here the first 3 letters or digits of the name or more. That's no problem. And then it's going to search for the correct item. It's the fast for computer. There's of course a lot number or a serial number when you work with serialized numbers, which you have to fill in here. That you load quite a while. And as you see from the preferences, the subtabs have already been highlighted. Group is Netherlands. I'm using backward trace, which is fine. And I click submit. In the meantime, on this item, I've also created an inventory adjustment, which I did before this webinar. So that's also one of the results you will see when this lot trace has been completed. It's not the fastest SuiteApp, but yeah, that's nothing new, but it will get there. Yeah, nice. Okay, well, this is the new menu, the lot trace. As you can see, there's a backward trace, the group Netherlands, the item and the lot number are here. You see the total quantity on hand, the outbound quantity, and below you can see the 4 subtabs which have now been revealed. First you see the inbound, where you can see the item name, but most importantly, the purchase order number and the item receipt. So you can immediately see, okay, where does this item come from? From which purchase order did I buy this item which went wrong? On the build tab, well, I haven't assembled anything, but if you have any assembly, then you can see here what has happened. You can see the assembly item and the related records, the date that it has been completed, and the location. But most importantly, I guess, or most interesting is outbound. As you see, there are quite some outbound orders. So I've received one faulty one, but maybe all these outbound orders are wrong. So you can now immediately in one go see where did I send these units to. So this is of course the one I've just created from sales order 1102, which with this item fulfillment on this date. You can see immediately where it went. I also sold some to myself yesterday, but yeah, I have no delivery address there. But via this way, you can easily see where the items went, but also where they come from, which is quite nice if you need this for any reason. And on other transactions, you can see the inventory adjustments which have been made or any other changes to the inventory. Yeah, and this is a very neat way of tracing all the movements along the supply chain of these serialized or lot numbered items. The process is exactly the same for serialized items, so that shouldn't be a problem. You can also export this and then see maybe in Excel if these lines are longer than expected. Well, that concludes the webinar. It wasn't that long. I know there was an hour scheduled, but in half an hour it's already done. I hope this brought some interesting new features to your NetSuite. If you need any assistance, you can always contact us. And I think I'll give the word to Marcel again. So thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you very much, Ruben. That was very nice. As I mentioned before, we will be posting this webinar online, so you can have a look at it again or share it with colleagues or anybody else who might be interested. In this same email, we will also answer the questions that were added to the chat. If you have any comments, questions, or any suggestions, feel free to reach out to me. That's my email address if you like. And well, thank you very much for attending this webinar. There's 3 more coming, as I mentioned before the start. Feel free to register for any of them, and I hope to see you in one of those. Thank you very much, and see you later.
Bye-bye.